Hey, welcome to the CHGO Blackhawks podcast. A little special episode here with myself, Mario Tirabassi. Jay and Greg, they got a little bit of an early Christmas break here, taking this one off, but we are happy to be joined by our NHL draft prospects guru, Chris Peters of Flo Hockey. Chris, thanks for joining us ahead of the World Juniors and ahead of a big trip to Sweden for you.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. It's good to be with you, and yeah, it's going to be a busy couple of weeks here for me, but yeah, looking forward to getting out to Gothenburg and covering the tournament. It's one of the best times of the year for sure.
Is this your first time covering it in Europe, or have you been there before?
No, I've been there before. Covered it in I think the Czech Republic was the first World Juniors I covered in Europe, and that was right before COVID. So,
Okay, okay.
so yeah, but and it's seems to be like it's in Canada almost every other year. So,
Right, yeah.
been there, been to Buffalo. But yeah, this will be I guess my second World Juniors in Europe. So very much looking forward to it. Really pumped about it being in Gothenburg. I mean, unbelievable city from what I hear, and really can't wait to see what that's all about. And the best part about the whole tournament, the two rinks are 20 minutes apart, so I can actually
Oh,
watch
nice.
both groups before the medal round, which is often not possible.
Yeah.
So at least live, I watch the video, but to be able to see more games live than ever before is going to be great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's it's a really good setup to for the media to be able to get to both ends. So yeah, I mean the Blackhawks have a lot of interest in this year's World Juniors. This is one of my favorite times of the year to see some of the top young guys playing in what over the last couple of years has been the best men's tournament, where you get the best on the best, but they're just under 20 years old. So it should be a good tournament. I know USA has some gold medal aspirations. Canada is defending. Wanted to talk first about some of the guys who aren't going to be there for Canada and how that might affect them. Specifically, too, with Chicago, Kevin Korchinski and Connor Bedard. I think there was some speculation earlier this year where Kevin Korchinski may have been able to go back and represent Canada. Connor Bedard was never going to go. But now with Canada not having either of those guys, what's their roster look like? How are those two going to try and be replaced?
Yeah, it's tough. I think, Korchinski certainly was a guy that Canada probably was banking on in the summer, and then as the season progressed, they became pretty clear that they weren't going to get him. But I think that's probably a significant loss. Obviously, you lose Connor Bedard, and there are other players in the NHL, Adam Fantilli, Zach Benson also not going. So that does significantly hinder Canada's hopes here. They did get Matt Platra from the Bruins. They got Tristan Luneau from the Ducks. So they have some guys with NHL experience in their roster, but they only have one returning player. So to not have guys that have been there and have performed at a high level there really does hurt, their overall outlook in terms of their ability to compete. But I mean, the thing about Canada at the World Juniors is it doesn't really matter who they bring. They always seem to be competitive. And I think Canada with an underdog mentality can be a very dangerous thing.
It's interesting to have the underdog mentality when you're the defending
Yeah.
gold medal champion. But yeah, I mean, that's all. This is one of the besides it being the holidays, it seems like one of the best times of year for Canadian players and the kids and the country too with the fan base. It's incredible. And
Yeah.
actually, just today, after morning skate with the Blackhawks ahead of the game against the Montreal Canadiens here in Chicago. Montreal media was there, and they were asking Connor about the watching the World Juniors and potentially playing for Team Canada at some point in his career um, beyond the World Juniors. And yeah, I mean, it's just they're always amped for it. So
Yeah.
should be a lot of fun. Now, one guy that was in camp for the Canadians but didn't make the squad from the Blackhawks was Paul Ludwinski. From our perspective, he's been having a really good year this year, bouncing back after injuries were hindering him last season in Kingston. What's your read on Ludwinski and what he brings to the table?
Yeah, I think he's still trending, especially with the way that he's played this year. He's trending pretty positively. I think, you look at those guys that are early second round picks as it's almost like first round plus guys typically, the guys that are picked before, the 40th pick. And, I think for him, he's on a path where, he's probably, long term middle six, bottom six kind of player. Um, excuse me, with some scoring pop. And I think that he is, still on track to be that. Not making this Canadian team, it's certainly disappointing. I think especially because there was opportunity. There was certainly, it was pretty open competition for forward spots, but it's a hard team to make as well. But yeah, I don't think that significantly hinders his outlook in terms of anything. And I think he was probably in the mix, pretty late in the process here, and was one of the guys that may have been, among the last cuts. But either way, it's always tough for these guys. The World Juniors carry such weight in Canada. So I feel like it's hard if you don't make it for any country, but it's just I think it's probably even tougher for when you go back to and have to play junior games, knowing that you had an opportunity. So so long as he doesn't let it rattle his confidence, I don't think it's going to be a problem. He's had a great year with Kingston. He's putting up points. He's looks healthy, looks ready to play, and I think that in terms of OHL production, I would say, for 19-year-olds in particular, don't get too wrapped up into the numbers of it all. Because you would expect them to produce at a high level, you expect them to be point per game players. But it's just more, is he getting stronger? Is he getting, more aggressive? Is he getting more physical? All those different things that, will help him when he gets to the NHL level or the pro level. That's what you want to see. And I think that we're seeing that from him.
Another guy in the Blackhawks system who's playing in the OHL and doing pretty well for himself this year as far as goal scoring goes is Nick Lardis. Not part of this Canadian group or in camp or anything, but maybe a guy who next year could be in the mix. What's your read on him, as he was a third round pick in this last June's draft, and a lot of people are saying, how did he get there?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you look at Nick Lardis last year, and he had a very good season. He had a really nice showing at the World Under 18s too, where he scored 4 goals. And this year he's already matched his goal total from when he joined the Bulldogs last season in 33 games in now 30 games. So he's obviously still progressing at a pretty high level. So to see him doing that, I think is really a positive thing. I think for this team in particular, for Canada, wanted to go more 19-year-old heavy. They already knew that they were going to have a 17-year-old potential be one of their best players in Macklin Celebrini. Wanted to surround that with more veteran talent. So, I don't think that Lardis was really ever seriously in the mix for this team just at this stage of his career. Will be next year. I mean, I think that the way that he's played this season, the fact that he's a goal scorer, the fact that he has some ability around the net is going to help him to be part of it next year. But he doesn't necessarily have the size or just that one trait that's going to really help this team win at this point. So no small thing to have the season that he's having right now. I wouldn't be too worried about him not being part of this Team Canada.
Now, one guy that you did mention there, Macklin Celebrini, he's going to be a big part of this team. Might miss a game or two. Him and Frank Nazar in back-to-back days laying some big hits. One of them may be penalized, one might not be. But with Celebrini, like, what are the expectations for him in this tournament? Being a guy who's going to be relied on a lot for Canada, and a guy who's in his draft year, and coming off of last year's tournament where you saw guys like Adam Fantilli and Connor Bedard, play major roles for Canada. Where do you feel like Celebrini fits into that expectation?
The funny thing is, as good as he's been, and we've talked about him as the number one guy for all year, pretty much, but I still feel like he's being underhyped. I think that he's that good. Basically, he might be listed as Canada's number 2 center. He's their best player, bar none. Like, no doubt in my mind, that is the best player on that team. And that includes the guys that are 19 years old, that are high draft picks, that have, had some NHL experience and different things like that. Like, I think he's a better player than Matt Poitras is right now. And Matt Poitras is playing in the NHL. So that's pretty interesting to see a 17-year-old, a guy that won't turn 18 until the summer, come in and be that big of a factor. Plenty of other players in years past have not been put in the position that Celebrini is about to be put in with this Canadian team. Nathan McKinnon was a 4th line forward. Quentin Byfield was a 4th line forward. I think we look at the impact that Alexis Lafreniere had in his draft season for Canada. He was the MVP of that tournament. He got hurt and still was just producing a ton. Celebrini is actually even younger because Lafreniere was a late birth date. Celebrini's even younger coming in here, and basically he's going to be Canada's probably most important center. Now, you did mention we're waiting word to see if he's going to get suspended. He delivered a check from behind an exhibition game. The player that he hit left the game, did not return. I would be now a little bit more surprised if Celebrini doesn't have to sit at least the first game of the World Juniors. I don't think it'll necessarily be more than that. But I do think there could be some supplemental discipline coming, which is really tough for him. Canada starts the tournament with Finland, so not an easy game to start off, whereas like USA is playing Norway in their first game. So, like that's a problem for Canada to lose a player of that significance right off the hop like that. And it's uncharacteristic of his game. He's not usually hitting guys from behind, but this was a pretty clear case. So would be a little bit more surprised if he doesn't sit. Canada, as we're recording this, Canada and USA will be set to play a pre-tournament game on Saturday. I doubt we'll see him in that game, and then we'll see what happens from there. So a lot to be figured out on that front, but I think no matter what, when he does return, he'll be one of their most important players.
So Celebrini is the top prospect in this year's 2024 draft class. One of the other guys that's up there with him, maybe number 2, number 3, depending on who you talk to, Cole Eiserman. He was left off of Team USA's roster here as we'll transition to talking about the state side. But so let's say the Blackhawks don't get the draft rigged for them again, and they land at number 2 or number 3. What are your thoughts on Eiserman and his abilities, and what do you take away from him not being on Team USA here?
Yeah, I mean, for one, it's not a huge surprise that he didn't make the team. He didn't make the camp, mainly because you look at Team USA's roster and 8 of their top 9 forwards are first round draft picks and high picks, guys that, and there's also like built-in chemistry. Will Smith, Ryan Leonard, Gabe Perreault, and Gabe Perreault all played together last year, play at BC together. You're not breaking those guys up. Cutter Gauthier established himself as the number 1 center. He plays with Rutger McGroarty and Jimmy Snuggerud, guys that he played with when he was at the national team development program, in certain settings. And then, you also have basically your third line, Frank Nazar, with guys that he's familiar with, and Isaac Howard, who he played with when he's at the NTDP, and Gavin Brindley, who he plays with at Michigan. So there really wasn't like, where's the spot for Cole Eiserman? If I'm the Chicago Blackhawks, if the draft was tomorrow and I get the number 2 pick, Eiserman would not be my pick at number 2. There's a couple of reasons for that, but I mean, I think he's an exceptional goal scorer. I think he's got a lot of potential to put up a lot of goals, and obviously you want that. I think for right now, you look at the right shot defensemen that are available in this upcoming draft. You look at some of the power forward kind of players that are available. I think there's a little bit, you want to add some variety to your lineup. And I think, Cole Eiserman would be another sub 6 foot, kind of scorer, that's something the Hawks are starting to build a lot of. There's going to be guys like Caden Lindstrom. There's going to be guys like Artem Levshinov, who's playing at Michigan State, Anton Silyev in Russia, like all these players that bring something a little different that you don't have. And it's not a slight to Cole Eiserman, because I think he's a top tier talent in this draft. I think, he's got a chance to score 70 plus goals this season, which is insane, and so the thing is him not making Team USA doesn't really bother me for his draft stock, but I think there have been elements of his game, which I just, I'm not necessarily sold on yet, outside of him being an elite goal scorer, which I'm completely sold on. He is outstanding in that regard, and it's obviously a very important skill.
Now, talking about the guys who are going to be there, Blackhawks have 4 prospects on Team USA's roster. Not sure all 4 of them will be in the everyday lineup, but where do you see some of those guys like Nazar and Moore and Gavin Hayes and Sam Renzel fitting into this team? I know you said just now, their top 9 forwards are pretty solidified with their familiarity with each other. Where do you see them all fitting in, and what do you see them bringing to the table for Team USA?
Yeah, well, I think we'll start with Frank Nazar, just because I think of those players, he's going to play the biggest role, probably Team USA's number 3 center. He's an option for them on the power play. It's kind of between him and Gavin Brindley for their second unit in the bumper position. He's probably going to be on their PK. He's going to get some tough defensive matchups. He's going to be looked to as a guy that can score for them. And I think the top, we're not looking at this as a top 6, bottom 6. We're looking at this as a top 9, fourth line. That's kind of what we have for this team. The top 9 are going to be expected to produce and produce consistently. And teams that have that scoring depth typically do very well. So I think Frank Nazar is going to be part of that. So big role there. Oliver Moore is probably, there's a chance he's the 13th forward. I think he'll still be in the lineup. I think he will be in the everyday lineup. But he'll probably be more in a penalty killing fourth line role. However, they let him kind of play with Cutter Gauthier and Jimmy Snuggerud in their first pre-tournament game on the top line, and showing that versatility to be able to play with those players. Like, that line was not going as well until Moore got on it, because they were able to play with the pace. Also, his speed is an elite weapon on big ice. He's can beat defenders wide and bring it back to the middle. And so I think that that's something that also kind of puts him more firmly on the radar. So he might not play big minutes, but I think there's a role for him on this team. It's not determined who the 14th forward of the team will be, which is to say the player that won't dress and will have to be waiting for a potential injury or illness to replace somebody. I think that Oliver Moore, with his performance thus far, has really solidified himself in the regular rotation. Moving over to Gavin Hayes, fourth line forward, penalty killing role. Here's a guy that's on pace for 50 plus goals in the OHL this season, and you have to show versatility. The one concern that I have with him is that, I think his feet are a little heavy. I don't think he has the pace that matches this US roster as 1-to-1, but he's got size, he's got aggressiveness, he can play physical. He has good instincts. So I think you'll see him more kind of in that fourth line role, which, ultimately, yes, he might be a 50-goal scorer in the OHL, but I just don't see him as a top 6 player in the NHL. So, I think him familiarizing himself with this role is probably a good thing. And then lastly, Sam Rinzel looks like probably USA's 7th defenseman, possibly the 8th. It really depends. They have 5 right shots and 3 left shots. So one defenseman's not going to dress. It's kind of down between Rinzel and I think Aaron Manetian for that 7th or 8th defenseman kind of thing. I think Sam's actually looked good this year. I think he's improved. I think that he's taking steps. I like his defending better than I did last year. I think the offensive game is coming along. He's a high-end skater. He makes a lot of plays. I think that there's certainly a spot for him. He is Team USA's biggest defenseman. At least he's their tallest. He still needs to get physically stronger. He needs to fill out his frame more to maximize the size that he does have. But I think there's a spot for him here, and it very well may be as that 7th defenseman, which, the one thing about Rinzel that I try to remind Blackhawks fans about is that when they drafted him, eyes were wide open. This is a long-term project. The fact that he was good enough to make this team at this stage, 2 years past his draft, I know it seems like forever in prospect years, but for this particular prospect, that is an amazing development for him. So he's on the roster. Whether or not he plays a regular role remains to be seen. I think he still needs to clean up some things defensively, needs to get physically stronger, those types of things. But the fact that he's here is a very significant benchmark for him, considering the fact that when the Blackhawks drafted him, it was eyes wide open. This is a project pick.
Now, 2 guys that are going to be representing Team Slovakia, they're returning to the World Juniors after last season being knocked out by Bedard in Canada. Adam Gajan in net and Martin Myziak up front for them. What's your reading on them and Team Slovakia's expectations in this tournament, as they've kind of been one of those countries like on the rise over the last few years, closing the gap between Canada, US, Sweden, Finland, and the rest of the participants in the tournament?
Yeah, I think that that Slovakia is a real dark horse to medal. Like they'd obviously have to knock off one of USA, Sweden, Canada, which I think are the best teams in the tournament. But I think Slovakia has enough to do it. And a lot of that starts with my belief in Adam Gajan as their goaltender. We saw him at this tournament last year basically become a story. Goalie of the tournament out of nowhere. a guy that wasn't even expected to be on the team, and now he's looking at his second year starting, was a goal away from beating Canada in the quarterfinals in overtime. So that is an impressive thing. And so that to me, if he's on the top of his game, if he plays anywhere close to what he did last year, Slovakia's got a chance because they beat USA last year. They almost beat Canada. Like, they've got a chance. They've got good forwards up front, including Martin Misiak, who I think is one of the guys that really, last year was kind of that under the radar pick, but gosh, he had such a tremendous playoffs for Youngstown. And when he came to the USHL, he had to grow into his game in North America. And I think he did that. And now he's continuing that in the OHL. He's going to play a bigger role this year than he did last year. He's just a player that I really like a lot in terms of the way that he plays. He's got some grittiness to him. He's got skill. He can score. So there's a lot to like about him and a lot to like about the Slovakian team. I mean, I really do think they are a dark horse to medal, probably bronze. I don't think that they're going to get far enough. I don't think they have enough depth to compete with the Swedens and the USAs and the Canadas. But gosh, they got a real chance to make a go of it here. So, but I think, Adam Guyan, if you look, the other thing too, if you look at Adam Guyan's numbers this year, you might be like, they're okay. But USHL, it's a tough league, especially for young goalies. His first year in the league. I've seen him play enough this year where it's like, all right, there are definitely more good games than bad games. And I think he's just starting to hit his stride. I mean, I think that there is a lot to like about the Slovakian roster, and certainly the two guys that the Blackhawks have are among the players that can very much contribute to their success.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see all these guys play, and Guyon is one of them because it's hard to get a read on goalies at this stage of their development, and like you said, like his USHL numbers are pretty good, but it's also still the USHL. Like, I think, do you feel like once he gets to college and he's committed to Minnesota Duluth, once he gets to college, that'll be the best barometer of like where he's at in his development?
I mean, I think we're always, kind of evaluating. And so, I think, I think the USHL is a good league, so to see him, he's, at a 911 save percentage with 14 wins already this season. It's pretty good. It's pretty good, and the league scoring has been pretty up this year, it seems. And what you look for is, how many bad games does he have, and then how does he respond to those bad games? And there aren't a lot of games where it's like, oh, he was off it, there. So that's a good sign. And then the college games, I think there's always an adjustment period, and I think Minnesota Duluth as a program, they've been among the best programs in terms of competitiveness, but they're starting to kind of come back to earth a little bit after a real great period. So I think he's going to be challenged there. And yeah, I think college is a good barometer because it just feels like it's on the cusp of that professional, even though it's not pro, they're playing against a lot of older, faster players. And I think that actually is very good for a guy like Adam, where, he's going to see good shots. He's going to play in a structured system that will help maximize his talents. Minnesota Duluth has typically sent players on to pro contracts. It's very rare that they've had a drafted prospect come into them. And so I think that will also, be kind of give them a head start. But, I think the pick of Guy and making him the first goalie picked last year is always going to put a target on his back because he'll be compared against Trey Augustine, Jacob Fowler, Michael Harabel, all the guys that went after him, because it was a very, like we said, it's a good year for goalies. You just don't take him in the first round anymore. There wasn't anybody that was heads above, but Adam Guyan had every right to be in the mix with those other guys to say that I'm the best of that group. And now he has this other opportunity to prove it. But again, he was another guy where there was more of a project where it was like, he's a little wild in the net. He's super athletic and tall and rangy, but can he rein it in? And I think this year what we've seen is he's starting to do that. He's getting better with rebound control. He's getting better with not overcommitting. So those are types of things that we saw last year that are starting to get cleaned up. So very positive trajectory for Adam Guyan, and a guy that I think if you're watching the World Juniors, if Slovakia has a prayer, it's because they've gotten the goaltending.
I mean, It's going to be exciting to watch for sure. It's like I said before, this is one of my favorite times of the year. Blackhawks have a lot of guys to watch, a lot of interest in this tournament, so should be a lot of fun. Chris, thank you so much for your time. This has been super informative. Really appreciate your insight every time we're able to talk. Chris Peters, Flo Hockey. Anything that you want to promote or anything you got going on before you head over to Sweden?
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely head over to flowhockey.tv. You're going to have a ton of coverage, breaking news, analysis, prospect analysis, a Celebrini watch. We're going to have everything on there. We've got a lot of video features. We actually have one up on Frank Nazar right now on our YouTube channel, which is also Flo Hockey. So make sure you're subscribed to our socials for a ton of original content there as well. And then the podcast, Talking Hockey Sense, I have an hour and 15 minutes or so of World Junior previews going team by team and shouting out a lot of different players. So including Adam Guyon. So
Awesome.
and all the Blackhawks guys that we just talked about. So definitely check that out. But yeah, it's always a pleasure to do this. Tell the boys I said hello and Merry Christmas and everything else. And Mario, it's just yeah, man, it's so much fun. So glad I could take some time with you guys, because I really do enjoy coming on with this show.
Absolutely, anytime. You have an open invite on our show. One of the exclusive club members of the open invite.
Nice.
So yeah, appreciate it, Chris. Hopefully we'll talk in a few weeks and down the road and get ready for the draft, and hopefully see you at the Sphere in Vegas.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks a lot, buddy.
No problem. Thanks, Chris.
We all silly like the mayor.